Unlike Elizabeth, Victoria had to spend almost 4 decades without her beloved husband by her side.
Queen Victoria did flag after the death of Prince Albert, not for the rest of her reign, as some people mistakenly think. It was really for about 10 years that she was much more in retirement, and she worked all the way through it. I mean, there's a fantasy that she was just lying on a daybed in sobs. I mean, in fact, she did work, but she found the performance role of the monarch too difficult in those years.
The politicians constantly feared, because she was so reclusive and shy and didn't like waving from balconies and didn't wear crowns, that somehow or another she was out of touch. And in a very mysterious way, she wasn't.
In June 1897, Queen Victoria was persuaded to make an effort for her Diamond Jubilee. She was captured in this rare footage, and she had an empire to call upon.
London had never seen anything like it. The Bengal Lancers, people from all over the world, African warriors, parading through the streets with all their wonderful costumes and uniform. It was partly a demonstration of this extraordinary political stability, that this institution, which had been so fragile in 1837, was now growing stronger than ever in 1897, thanks to this very eccentric, clever but strange woman sitting in an open carriage riding through the streets of London in a black bonnet. The whole place was alive with excitement.
Both Victoria and then Elizabeth came here to St Paul's Cathedral to mark their Diamond Jubilees. For Victoria, who by then was 78, it was a rare public appearance. She was still mourning Albert decades after his death. And she was frail, too frail to climb these stairs and go inside. So instead, when her carriage drew up here in front of jubilant crowds, she remained in it, and the whole service came out to her. But we do know what Queen Victoria thought about her Diamond Jubilee. She wrote about it in her journals, and just a few years ago, Queen Elizabeth had them all put online. Victoria wrote, "A never-to-be-forgotten day. No one ever, I believe, has met with such an ovation as was given to me, passing through those 6 miles of streets, including Constitution Hill. The crowds were quite indescribable, and their enthusiasm truly marvelous and deeply touching. The cheering was quite deafening, and every face seemed to be filled with real joy. I was much moved and gratified." As well as being visible, the monarch must connect with every part of the United Kingdom. Today, the Queen, a direct descendant of Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, arrives in Edinburgh for Holyrood Week. It starts with the ancient ceremony of the keys, unchanged since Victoria's time.
Well, it's a very significant process, because it's the presentation of the city's keys to the monarch. But also, you know, for people of the city, it's a meaningful event because it's about the Queen's authority in the city.
It's also about a welcome for garden party guests in the spectacular grounds of the palace. Royal garden parties were introduced by Victoria at Buckingham Palace in the 1860s and brought here to Scotland by Elizabeth's grandfather, George V. This is the Queen attending as a child. 8,000 people have been invited to this garden party at the Palace of Holyrood House. It's an annual event that's been hosted here throughout the Queen's long reign, and it's all about celebrating Scottish achievement and heritage.
She's just brilliant. At her age, to be still doing things like this, it is just fantastic.
I think today has been a very good example of exactly what we as a country do well, and I think she's at the very heart of that.
And the fact she visits our islands, you know, she embraces all the parts of Scotland that we love.
Her and the Duke have done a marvellous job over the years, and I hope they'll have many more.
what over the 6 decades of her reign has been done is the knitting together, I think, of an extraordinarily ever richer tapestry of Scottish life. My lot are part of the older threads, but every year through this great gathering, new, fresh threads are added.
The Queen has deep personal connections to Scotland. Her mother grew up here. Her sister, Princess Margaret, was born here. In fact, she was the first royal baby to be born in Scotland for more than 300 years. And since she was a child, Scotland is where the Queen has always come on her family holidays. During late summer and autumn, the Queen still enjoys her longest spell of privacy in the place she's visited since childhood. It's a tradition started by Victoria, who in her 20s was only the second reigning British monarch to venture north of the border since the days of Charles I.
Queen Victoria and Prince Albert fell in love with Scotland. Prince Albert saw Germany in it. He was reminded of Germany, the sort of forests of firs and all that kind. Queen Victoria was privy to a kind of ordinary life up there that was more difficult in Windsor or in London.
Victoria did deer stalking and watercolours and long walks in the heather and getting rained upon and all that.
I think there's something about its sort of vastness when you get up into the Highlands, and that sense of being far away in this kind of mountain kingdom.
Victoria and Albert bought land here, which they developed, building the magnificent Balmoral Castle.
Balmoral was very carefully chosen up on a bluff with the forest quite far back and the water very much below and so on. And it became their own place. You know, it wasn't a house of the British monarchy. It was the house of Victoria and Albert. And that meant a great deal to her.
The home, lovingly designed by Albert for Victoria, now belongs to Elizabeth. A private residence, but no longer just a royal idyll. For 18 weeks of the year, it's open to the paying public. As she grew older, Victoria spent much of her life at Balmoral. She was here on Wednesday, the 23rd of September, 1896, the day she overtook her grandfather, King George III's record. She wrote, "Today is the day on which I have reigned longer by a day than any English sovereign." Just days after Victoria had become the longest reigning monarch, she was pictured right here beneath the terrace at Balmoral. It was a very special moment, and that's because it was the first time that Victoria had ever been captured on film. Here she is, surrounded by dogs, children and grandchildren. Victoria, a focus of national unity, who chose to mark her momentous day quietly. Elizabeth will also be in Scotland, but will carry out some official engagements. This is where Queen Victoria was on the day that she became the longest reigning monarch in British history. And this is also where her great-great-granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth, will be when she passes that record on the evening of Wednesday, September the 9th. She will have been on the throne for 23,226 days. There'll be no fuss, no grand celebration. It's business as usual, we're told. But all the same, it is a remarkable achievement and something none of us will ever again see in our lifetime.
Even for those that don't think about the monarchy or don't follow it particularly, the fact that she is there and it's there as an institution and she never puts a foot wrong.
I don't think we should withhold our gratitude to both women for keeping this institution, which I think many people cherish, in spite of all the jokes we make about it.
By being inscrutable untouchable, unfashionable, and unfaddish, the Queen remains a concept that all people potentially can connect with. And I think that's a very important and valuable aspect of our national life.
And she simply is always out there meeting people, speaking to people, and very much identifying herself with the whole population, not just one certain group of it.
Politicians come and go when they talk about the big society. The Queen and the royal family have practiced it and continue to practice it in all sorts of ways. And that stems totally from the sense of duty and religious convictions of Elizabeth II.
This is a great country, and one of the reasons it's great is because we have had this continuity of kings and queens for so many centuries, and this Queen is probably going to be seen as one of the greatest of all.
I think what she has done is she has made us all believe again in the viability of the institution she represents. And to me, that's a great achievement.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.